Hi, I'm Larcenia. My sister told me to shut up at dinner. You're just the unwanted one, she said, like I hadn't built the walls of that house with every sacrifice I made in silence. They smiled while cutting me out, piece by piece. A missing name in the trust, a photo with my face removed, a chair near the kitchen like I was barely invited. But what if I told you the one they tried to erase ended up holding the deed? Would you stay quiet? Or would you come back for everything they said you didn't deserve? I arrived 5 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because being on time felt like a statement, like I still respected the idea of family gathering, even if I wasn't entirely sure it respected me. The house was as polished as ever, all stone and glass and expensive silence. Isolde's kind of silence, the curated kind. As I stepped into the foyer, the air barely acknowledged me. I could hear laughter trailing from the dining room, the clink of glass, voices in rehearsed harmony. I made my way toward the noise, clutching the blueberry pie I baked that morning, a small, ridiculous offering, but it was Dad's favorite. It used to mean something. Merla glanced up first. No greeting, no smile. Just a nod, the sort you give to a neighbor at a red light. She looked back down at her wine. Isolde swept toward me a second later, all perfume and purpose. You made it, she said, like I was the weather, not someone she grew up with. Then she pointed, without touching, toward the last seat on the far end, near the kitchen door. I knew that seat. It was always for the guest you forgot you invited. I placed the pie on the buffet without a word. No one noticed. The table was full. Cousins, their spouses, a couple of grandkids too old to be charming, too young to be rude. Though they tried. The toasts began not long after I sat. Isolde led, of course, lifting her glass like a conductor before a performance. She thanked everyone. She thanked Merla for her resilience and matriarchal wisdom, even though Merla hadn't cooked a meal or paid a bill in 10 years. She thanked Blake for taking care of the real estate, and Julia for keeping the family so beautifully photographed. She thanked everyone but me. I counted to 5 in my head. 1 Mississippi. 2. No one seemed to notice the missing name. Or maybe they did, and decided not to notice. Plates were passed, jokes shared, conversations rose and fell like a tide I wasn't welcome to step into. I caught a few glances from across the table, the kind people give when they think you're about to say something that'll ruin the vibe. I stayed quiet. I had learned that trick too well. It was when the conversation shifted to Mom's declining health. She's just not as sharp lately, Isolde said, that I felt my spine lock in place. Then came the estate talk. We've been thinking, she began, looking around. It might be time to simplify some things. I knew where this was going. I opened my mouth gently. Have you looked at the terms of Dad's original trust? Isolde didn't look at me. She just laughed, tight and sharp. Shut up, she said. Her voice had no edge, no heat, just cool dismissal. Then she added, with a tilt of her head, You're just the unwanted one. I don't remember the sound the room made after that. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe that's what hurt the most. No gasps. No one rushing to soften the blow. One cousin coughed, a fork dropped, but the conversation continued. Around me. Without me. I kept my hands under the table. They were shaking. I looked down the length of the table, at Merla, who said nothing, at Isolde, who already moved on, at the pie still untouched on the buffet, sagging slightly as it cooled. Then I stood. I folded my napkin slowly, placing it on the table like it was the last thing I'd ever set down in that house. I didn't speak. I didn't give them a show. I just walked, past the photos in the hallway, where my face appeared smaller and smaller over the years, eventually fading out entirely in the more recent frames. My heels made sharp, steady clicks against the marble floor. It was the only sound I let them hear. As the front door clicked shut behind me, I realized no one had tried to stop me. No one even followed. Not one voice called out. The sound of my heels faded, but the echo of her words didn't. The silence the next morning was different. It wasn't the stillness of early hours or the hush before city traffic woke up. It was personal, a hush that settled into the walls like dust, into the creases of my clothes, into the chair I never bothered to smooth out the night before. I hadn't even changed. My dress hung on me like it was still waiting to be noticed. I didn't sleep. I just sat, mostly in the dark, sometimes watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. Not thinking, not quite feeling. I made tea out of habit. I didn't drink it. The kettle was something to hold, something to keep my hands moving. And then I stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, until a soft slide echoed from the front door. No knock, just that faint scrape, like a whisper that wanted to be ignored. I walked over, half expecting a flyer or neighborhood newsletter, but it was an envelope, heavy, cream-colored. The name printed on it stopped me. Larcenia Whitman. Larcenia. They didn't even care enough to spell it right. I sat down on the edge of the couch and opened it slowly, the way you open something you didn't ask for, but might not be able to throw away. Inside was an invitation, or maybe a summons. A family discussion this Saturday about the estate, next steps, unity. Isolde's name was at the bottom. Elegant typeface, no signature. It felt like being served. I held the paper in my lap for a while, folded it, unfolded it, the same way people touch old photographs when they're deciding whether to frame them or burn them. And then I stood, walked to the trash can, and dropped it in. But it didn't stay there. A few minutes later, I found myself pulling it back out, brushing off a bit of coffee grounds like it deserved a second chance. I pressed the crease flat with my palm and laid it on the table. Just looking at it, trying to figure out whether I was being asked to attend or warned not to show up. The phone stayed silent. Not one message, no apology, not even a fake, vague text from Merla. I checked twice, even knowing better. I didn't text back. I didn't text anyone. Instead, I cleaned. I vacuumed the rug, even though it wasn't dirty. I wiped down baseboards like I was erasing fingerprints no one had left. My hands moved faster than my thoughts. At one point, I caught sight of a familiar fabric peeking out from the back of my closet. The dress. The one I wore to Dad's funeral. It still had the faint scent of that day's rain, buried under the cedar and soap of my wardrobe. I pulled it out and hung it on the door, right where I'd see it. Not as a costume, not as a surrender, as a reminder. They would expect me to cry. They'd expect a scene, a refusal maybe, or a desperate call to ask, why me? But I wasn't giving them that, not anymore. I wouldn't let them see me flinch again, not yet. I didn't throw the letter away, but I didn't RSVP either. 3 days had passed, but the words still echoed louder than any voicemail I never received. I hadn't reached out to anyone, and no one had reached for me. That was telling. It was late, just shy of midnight, when I grabbed my keys. I didn't have a plan, just a pulse. My apartment felt too small for my thoughts, and too quiet for the noise in my chest. The drive to the mansion wasn't long, but every turn felt like it was leading me somewhere I wasn't supposed to go anymore. But I went. The house was dark. Good. I parked around back like I used to when I was sneaking out as a teenager. Now I was sneaking in, and I had no reason to feel guilty, but old habits cling harder than relatives do. The side door near the garden creaked just as it used to. Inside, the air was colder than I expected, laced with something stale, like perfume past its expiration. I walked slowly, not turning on lights. I didn't want to disturb anything, or anyone. The hallway to my father's old study was still carpeted with the same rug I helped him choose from a catalog 15 years ago. It hadn't aged well. Neither had this family. The study door wasn't locked. It rarely had been. He always said if you needed to lock your ideas away, they probably weren't worth much to begin with. The smell hit me before the memories did. Cigars and cedar. I hadn't been in that room since the funeral. Everything was intact. The chair with the cracked leather arms, the crooked lamp he never fixed, the bookshelf with more dust than titles. I didn't sit down. I didn't feel ready to let the room hold me again. My hands moved without permission, opening drawers, searching more with feeling than intent. I found it in the one labeled "Do Not Touch." Of course I did. A thick white envelope tucked behind some property maps and insurance policies. My name, written in his unmistakable slanted print, Larcenia. My throat tightened, not because I was sad, because I was seen. I sat down finally and opened it. There was a letter. Short, just a few lines. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And they've tried to erase you. I never did. There are documents behind this letter. You'll know what to do with them. Don't let guilt speak louder than truth. He didn't sign it. He didn't have to. The papers were legal, sealed, dated. Pages confirming that he'd named me as controlling beneficiary of a specific trust. One tied directly to the estate, to this house. My name, not Isolde's, not Merla's, mine. I read them twice before standing. Everything in me wanted to scream, to drive to Isolde's polished driveway and throw these documents at her marble doorstep. But I didn't. Not because I was scared, but because I knew I only had one chance to do this right. Back in my apartment, I lit a single lamp and made tea I'd actually drink. As the kettle boiled, I checked the mailbox I'd ignored for days. Mixed in with utility bills and grocery flyers was a hand-addressed envelope. I knew the handwriting before I flipped it over. Alma. She was our housekeeper for 2 decades, until Isolde let her go without warning after Dad passed. She'd sent cards before, quiet ones, thoughtful ones. This one felt heavier. Inside was a note. Just a page. Neat cursive. Your father trusted you. He told me so. He was worried near the end. Said Isolde was circling like she already owned the place. He asked me to make sure you knew the truth if no one else did. I read it 3 times. Not for clarity, but for the warmth in her voice that had somehow survived on paper. She ended the letter simply. You see things they choose not to. You always have. Don't stop now. I placed her letter beside Dad's. 2 voices that hadn't crossed in years now sat side by side on my kitchen table, holding me up. I hadn't been erased, just hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. Some words don't hit until days later, like echoes that need time to ricochet through your bones. Familial consensus. That phrase had clung to the back of my mind ever since I opened Dad's envelope. I hadn't thought about that meeting during Mom's last hospital scare in years, but now every vague phrase, every uneasy look was starting to sharpen into focus. I drove across town that morning with the kind of determination you don't speak aloud. No makeup, no earrings, no armor, just my purse, a quiet rage, and a list of questions I wasn't going to ask nicely. The Harris County Records building smelled like mildew and paper cuts. The clerk behind the window had the weary kindness of someone who'd spent decades filing dreams and betrayals alike. I gave her my name and the estate details, careful to keep my voice even. She pulled the file slowly, flipping through it, her brow creasing just enough to make me lean in. It says here the trust was amended 2 years ago, she said, marked as finalized under familial consensus. That word again. I asked to see the paperwork. She made a copy and slid it under the glass. I didn't read the clauses first. My eyes went straight to the signature line. Merla Whitman. I knew that signature. I'd seen it on birthday cards, Christmas checks, the rare note tucked inside a casserole. The way her M always looped too tightly. The slant that leaned left, like it didn't want to be seen. This one looked like a stranger's attempt at forging her handwriting from memory. I didn't say a word to the clerk. I just thanked her and left. Back home, I dug through my old filing box, the one that still had unopened junk mail and a stack of cards I didn't know why I kept. I found Mom's last card to me, buried under an expired coupon for lawn care. The same signature, the same slant. I took photos of both. Then I called Vanessa. She'd been a sharp-as-glass handwriting analyst back when we were both at UT. She didn't ask why I needed her help. She just said, "Send it. I'll get back to you by the weekend." The email came 2 hours later. "Larcenia, no question. This isn't your mother's signature, and whoever did it didn't even do a good job hiding it." The chair creaked under me as I sat back, letting it sink in. I hadn't needed her to tell me, but hearing it from someone else made it official. This wasn't just emotional, it was legal. Fraud. A deliberate act meant to erase me from something I was born into. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I printed both signatures, side by side, one in pale ink on a card that said, "Hope this year brings you peace." The other, bold and neat, on a document that took away everything I had left of my father's legacy. I slid them into a manila folder and wrote 3 words across the front in red pen: intentional erasure. Then I locked it in the desk drawer where I used to keep old tax returns and warranty receipts. It didn't belong there, but I needed to feel like I had sealed something, even if the battle was only beginning. I didn't need her permission to be written back in. I just needed proof she never gave consent to write me out. The call came mid-morning. Merla's voice was as level as always, just softened with something I couldn't name. She said she wasn't feeling well and wanted to see me. That was it. No warmth, no apology, just a request wrapped in neutrality. I didn't ask questions. I said I'd come by after work. She gave no protest. By the time I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, the sun had dipped just enough to cast long, leaning shadows over the front walkway. The kind of light that feels like it's watching you more than guiding. The house looked the same, but the air inside felt rehearsed. Piano music floated from the speakers. Debussy, of course. Tea had already been poured, steam curling like a stage cue, and on the table between us, neatly centered, sat a folder. A silver pen rested on top like an ornament. Merla sat with her back straight, hands folded. Not frail, not sick, just ready. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice polite to the point of performance, "about everything. Your sister, the family, all the misunderstandings." She spoke as if we were peers in a boardroom, as if this wasn't personal. "I know you've been upset, but Isolde, well, she means well. She always has. You know how she gets assertive." I didn't answer. I just watched her. "Family unity," she continued, "matters more than paperwork, more than old arguments. You've always been independent. I thought maybe it might be time to put all this to rest." She reached forward and slid the folder toward me, her nails barely grazing the edge. "This would help," she added, "for everyone's peace." I glanced at the cover. A standard release form, voluntary forfeiture of claim, legal language dressed in euphemism. She was asking me to walk away from the house, from the trust, from Dad's will. The silver pen caught the light. I picked it up, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to feel its weight. It was smooth, heavy, too elegant for what it was about to do. Then I set it down, slowly, gently, like placing a knife back in a drawer. The silence stretched. She didn't look at me. Not really. When she finally spoke again, the warmth drained from her voice. Her lips tightened. "You were never supposed to be part of this, Larcenia. Your father, he had a soft spot. You reminded him of a version of himself that didn't last." I kept still. She continued, her tone flat. "You were an accident. He meant well, but you were always more his project than his daughter." The words landed with surgical precision. Clean. Cold. "I didn't come here to argue," I said, voice even. "I came to hear the truth, and I did." I stood, leaving the pen exactly where she'd placed it. As I turned to leave, she didn't stop me. No calls to reason, no tears, just the click of the folder closing behind me. I didn't sign away my rights, and I never will. 3 mornings after walking out of Merla's living room without touching that silver pen, I sat at my kitchen table with a file in front of me that weighed more than any guilt they'd tried to plant in me. There was no ceremony to it. Just a call, a short email, and a plan I didn't even need to say aloud. I had everything I needed, more than enough. I scanned the documents again, my father's trust papers, Alma's letter, the handwriting analysis, even the copy of the birthday card. Then I slid them into a clean red folder and tucked a note inside before heading out. Traffic was light. I parked 2 blocks from the law firm downtown, walked the rest of the way with a sense of calm I hadn't felt since before the dinner. Mr. Harlan's office hadn't changed, still lined with old casebooks and newer ones that probably hadn't been opened in years. He looked older too, but the kind of older that says he's only pretending to slow down. "I want everything frozen," I said. "Every account, every asset under dispute, until we're done." He didn't ask why. He just nodded, glanced at the folder, and said, "It's about time someone stopped letting them rewrite the rules as they go." By noon, the paperwork had been filed. The system was in motion. All I had to do now was wait. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Did you change the trust access? My card just got declined at the nursery." I didn't reply. By 9, the family group chat came alive like it hadn't in years. Isolde opened with, "Some of us are having issues with the estate accounts. Anyone know what's going on?" Trevor chimed in, "Cabin utilities just bounced. Thought those were auto-paid?" Candace, always dramatic, added, "This better not be another one of her phases." I stared at the messages without typing a word. Watching them spiral in confusion gave me a strange satisfaction, not because they were struggling, but because they finally had to sit in the dark I'd been left in for years. They had no idea the lights were off because I'd pulled the switch. The next morning, I pulled out an old accordion folder from the back of my closet. Inside were years of receipts, repair invoices from the lake house, roof work on the main house, even pest control visits I'd paid for after Trevor's daughter got bitten by something in the attic. I hadn't used my name on any of it. Dad set up a joint account under an LLC for privacy, and I'd used it without ever needing credit. They never thanked me because they never knew. Now, I laid each document out in date order, clipped by type, marked with tabs. I added notes in the margins, not to explain, but to timestamp, because time doesn't lie. Checks don't lie, and neither do water heater replacements when you've been the one footing the bill. I scanned everything and sent it to Mr. Harlan with one subject line, "In case they call me ungrateful again." No signature, no footer, just the quiet proof that I had never stopped caring for the house they wanted to push me out of. My name wasn't on the thank you cards, but my fingerprints were on the foundation. They thought I had no proof. I had receipts. I told myself I was just there to collect a few things. Some old books, maybe the jewelry box I left in the guest room closet. That's what I said out loud as I slipped on my flats and grabbed the tote bag. But the truth clung heavier than my purse. It had been 3 days since the accounts froze, and the group chat went eerily quiet. Too quiet. I knew Isolde well enough to know silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That's when I decided to go back. Not with fanfare, not to confront. Just to look. To remind myself where I once stood. Rowena opened the door before I could knock twice. She peeked around me quickly and pulled me in by the elbow. "She's not home. She's meeting with the estate lawyer," she whispered. "Candace is out too, probably spinning the story on Instagram." I almost laughed. Rowena led me down a hallway I hadn't stepped foot in for over a decade. The carpet had changed, but the lighting hadn't. Still too dim, too dramatic for a space meant to honor memories. The walls were lined with frames, milestone photos, glossy prints, some clearly retouched. The family wall, they used to call it. But I knew what it was now. A curated exhibit. We stopped in front of a frame I hadn't seen in years. Summer at the lake house. Everyone on the dock, soaked in sunlight. I remember the day clearly. I remember the boat, the laughter, the smell of sunscreen and charcoal. I remember driving us out there, but when I looked closer, my face was gone. Not faded, not blurred. Cut out, neatly. Precisely. A jagged corner remained near where my shoulder once brushed Isolde's. The cut was clean but not invisible, and the frame sat proudly, like truth had never occupied that space. "She said you didn't come that day," Rowena whispered. "But I remember, you drove me out on the water. You let me steer." I didn't answer right away. I just stared. Something in me broke, not loudly, not dramatically, more like a hinge coming loose inside a door that no longer needed to swing open for anyone. "I guess she didn't like the version of that day with me in it," I finally said. Rowena pulled out her phone and tapped a few things quickly. "They think I don't notice things," she said, "but I hear everything. They think I'm too young to understand." Her face was steady, but her hands shook. Later that night, after I got home and placed the books I didn't really need on my shelf, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "It's Ro. She's planning something with Aunt Candace. I heard them mention the deed." I read the message twice, then a third time, not for clarity, but to anchor the shift I felt inside me. Not fear, confirmation. I replied simply, "Thank you. You saw what they didn't want anyone to see. I wasn't the one erased. They just hoped no one would remember." I arrived 5 minutes early. Isolde had insisted on a formal estate meeting. A family reconciliation, she called it in the email. The subject line alone made me want to delete it, but I didn't. I showed up not to reconcile, but to watch them try to manage the optics. The dining room had been rearranged, not for comfort, but for control. A long table, perfectly centered, everyone seated by position, not by connection. Candace whispered with Trevor. Merla sat upright at the head, wearing pearls and quiet judgment. I took the seat furthest from Isolde. She opened with a toast, as if this were a celebration and not a reckoning. "We're all here because we want peace," she said, lifting her glass. "We've had a few misunderstandings, but that doesn't mean we aren't still family." Merla added, "It's time we put things in order. Larcenia, surely you don't want to drag this out." I didn't respond. I just set my phone on the table, screen down. Isolde continued, her tone syrupy. "We've all made sacrifices, and it's important we focus on unity instead of getting caught up in procedural details." I nodded once, then tapped the phone's screen. A voice crackled through the speakers. "Just stall her. She'll cave or walk. No one believes her anyway." It was Isolde, clear, calm, speaking to her lawyer last week. The room froze. Candace's face drained. Trevor looked away. Merla gripped the arms of her chair, but said nothing. I let the silence linger, thick and suffocating, before saying, "I wasn't going to say anything. I wanted you to hear yourselves first." No one moved. That's when the door opened. Mr. Harlan stepped in, briefcase in hand. He looked older than I remembered, but walked with the weight of finality. He placed the case on the table, unlatched it, and slid out a sealed envelope. "I was instructed to deliver this in person," he said, placing the envelope in front of Merla. She didn't touch it. Harlan turned to the room. "This is the amended will of Ellison Whitman, signed and notarized 10 months before his passing, unaltered. It names Larcenia as the sole controlling heir to the estate trust, including the River Oaks property." Isolde opened her mouth, but Harlan raised a hand. "You forfeited your legal rights when you knowingly submitted falsified amendments without full disclosure to the original trustees. You know what that means." The look in her eyes flickered. Not rage, not shock, fear. I stood, not triumphant, steady. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's reclamation. You tried to erase me from my own bloodline. My silence was never weakness. It was restraint." I turned toward Merla, who still hadn't opened the envelope. "And if you ever wondered why he trusted me instead of you, it's because he knew I wouldn't use his death to build a throne." I picked up my phone and walked out without looking back. I didn't win. I just stopped pretending I'd already lost. The quiet didn't hit all at once. It came in layers. First in the absence of voices, then in the weight of stillness that settled into the corners of each room. 2 days had passed since that meeting. Since the audio played, since Mr. Harlan dropped the envelope like a gavel, since I walked out without anyone trying to follow. I walked the halls now without needing permission. The doorknobs didn't feel like trespassing. The portraits didn't avoid my eyes. And the garden, wild from years of neglected trimming, felt like it could finally breathe again. Rowena sat with me on the patio as the sun filtered through the vines. Neither of us said much. She held a glass of lemonade, her thumb tracing the rim. The silence between us didn't feel awkward. It felt like rest, like acknowledgement. Inside, Merla hadn't come out of her room. I didn't expect her to. We had said everything without words. The envelope still sat untouched on the hall table. I wouldn't move it. That decision wasn't mine. I found myself wandering upstairs later that afternoon. I opened drawers, not searching, just noting. In one of Dad's old cabinets, I found the photo album he used to keep in his desk, the one he never let anyone touch. The pages crackled softly as I turned them. And there I was, age 12, standing slightly behind everyone else in a group photo, wearing a dress too big for me, smiling like I still believed being seen was enough. No one had cut me out of that one. I didn't cry. I touched the image gently, like you might touch a bruise that doesn't hurt anymore, but reminds you it once did. On the last page of the album, there was a blank spot. I pulled out a pen from the desk and wrote, "For every piece of me they tried to cut out, I grew stronger roots." Later that evening, I walked the perimeter of the house. The locks were old, most of them outdated. I had a locksmith replace every single one, not to bar them from entering, but to mark a change. A line. A beginning that no longer asked for permission from the past. That same day, I contacted a nonprofit in the city that supported women who had been displaced after losing their homes through manipulation, silence, or betrayal. I donated one wing of the house, a quiet space for rebuilding, for voices to find their own name again. Rowena found me later in the study. "Do you think you'll ever talk to her again?" she asked quietly. "I don't need her apology," I said. "I just needed the silence to end." She nodded, not asking more. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes a quiet witness is more powerful than any grand statement. She saw what others ignored, and she chose truth. That night, I stood at the top of the stairs, the hallway behind me now mine in name, memory, and intention. I didn't look back, not out of spite, but because I was finally moving forward. If there's one thing this chapter of my life has taught me, it's that silence is never just absence. It's a language. And sometimes, silence can be louder than screams. I didn't reclaim my place in this family to hurt anyone. I did it to remind myself that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you decide to keep. For anyone watching this who's ever felt erased, pushed aside, or told they were just something, just the widow, just the daughter, just the mistake, let me tell you, your value doesn't disappear because someone else refuses to see it. Sometimes the greatest power is knowing who you are when the room tries to make you forget. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own story? What did you do about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's talk in the comments. Whether it's to share your truth, your turning point, or just to say you see yourself in mine. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about family, legacy, or standing your ground, type 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. I want to understand. Let's make this a space for honest stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this. Ones that remind us we're not alone in the quiet, and that even the softest voices can carry the strongest truths.